Good morning and welcome to the 2025 CRB webinar series. Today's webinar will discuss the results of the CRB Core Breeding Program's multi-location lemon trials and upcoming field trials that will be open to grower participation. My name is Caitlin Stanton. I'm with the Citrus Research Board, and I'm joined today by Dr. Melinda Klein, who will be introducing our speakers.
Thank you, Caitlin. It's a pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Please welcome Juvenile Citrus Variety Collection Endowed Chair for the University of California, Riverside and Curator of the Juvenile Citrus Variety Collection, Dr. Tracy Kahn, and Associate Professor and Extension Specialist for Tree Fruit Crops at the University of Arizona, Dr. Glenn Wright. Doctors Kahn and Wright are two of the principal investigators leading the Citrus Research Board's Core Breeding Program, where they develop and identify new scion and rootstock cultivars suitable for California conditions. Dr. Kahn will begin this morning's webinar with her talk entitled CRB Core Breeding Program Results of Multi-Location Lemon Trials and a preview of upcoming grower trial selections. Tracy, please go ahead and share your screen to begin the presentation.
Okay, good morning. Hopefully you can see my screen. Okay, so this is the topic that both Glenn and I will be speaking on today. Okay. But in fact, there are many more people involved with this project than Glenn and I. You can see on the top list here is the list of principal investigators. So Glenn Wright and I are two of them, but also Mike Roos and Danelle Seymour are the other two. And the rest of the people listed here are the people who actually make this all happen. And specifically for what I'm going to be talking about in terms of the new growers trial and the new selections, Tony Siebert and Corinne Turnell play the important role of developing these new cultivars along with everyone else. So this is our project that we have, and it's a continuing project, and we have three objectives. The first objective, which is the focus of what we're talking about today, is actually developing for the industry new citrus scion cultivars with superior fruit quality and yield and potential for HLB tolerance or resistance. But we also have two other objectives that exist. One is to provide the California growers with new rootstock varieties with better tolerance to environmental stress and disease. And thirdly, the third one is to develop new knowledge about genes controlling fruit quality characteristics and other important traits. And this objective is important for the other two because the information we generate feeds back into the other two objectives. So this is showing you a little bit more about what we do in terms of developing. We do both scion improvements and rootstock improvements. The scion improvements, which is what the topic for today is, are either by hybridization or making crosses or by generating mutations, which are irradiated selections. They're creating small genetic changes with the focus on developing seedlessness. We also, as part of scion improvement, do evaluation of new introductions, but we won't be talking about that today. But for both of these improvements, both root scion and rootstock improvements, we also have to do what are called, we have to do extensive trials so we can find out if these have commercially important traits. So we currently have 22 scion trials at 4 locations and 10 rootstock trials that are currently going on. And what's going to happen is I'm going to talk about a new growers trials program. And as part of that, I will mention some of these scion trials. And then Glenn is going to talk about one at 4 different locations. So these are the 4 locations that we use. One is at Lindcove, at the Lindcove Research and Extension Center. Another one is in Paula with a collaborator. One is in Riverside in the ag fields at Riverside at UCR. And the last one is at the Coachella Valley Agricultural Research Station, which is part of UCR in Thermal, California. So that's where they are located. So starting in 2026, the plan is that our breeding program, in partnership with the CRB, is going to launch a supplementary grower trial system as part of our project to evaluate these new citrus selections under diverse conditions. And this initiative is going to allow California growers to attest or select a group of California growers to test advanced selections, which are currently in multi-location replicated field trials. So I'll mention these field trials as well. Some of them are very early field trials. The purpose of this program is to expand grower participation by establishing small, unreplicated plots of new UCR developed selections under controlled agreements. So we'll have agreements with those growers that participate in this program. And what the growers will do is they'll provide performance feedback to us and help assess the regional adaptability of these new unreleased citrus varieties. And we think that this will have a lot of benefits. We've been talking about this together for a couple years. We think it will actually bring stronger research grower collaboration, and it will give us more insights into the environmental into broader environmental and management issues. We also think that it will give early identification of regional standouts, since we will be looking at this in replicated trials, but then we will have these other unreplicated growers trials that will give us additional information. We think this will lead to faster and more accurate feedback about these new selections and which ones should be released. And it will improve industry adoption. Okay, so the basic qualification standards for programs acceptance. So we're going to take applications to the program from those who are growers that are interested. And then they'll need to meet eligibility requirements. And we are still working out the details, so they're not finalized yet, but they're going to be later presented as part of a CRB webinar this fall. But they include things like making sure that the varieties are secure, or secure and other issues. They don't need to be fenced, but we need to have some idea of the security. We also need, we're trying to get regional, broad regional information. So we're going to look at different locations and their, but also we want growers that are committed to participating and helping with this research. So what will happen is that the selected growers will actually trial 5 to 10 trees of each selection. They'll get to choose how much, and it'll also be based on budwood availability, with no more than 10 growers per selections. And they're going to be operated under what UC requires us to do, which is they need to be operated under a material transfer agreement, which is also called a non-propagation agreement. And that just basically prohibits unauthorized propagation or sale or distribution of trees or fruit. And it restricts commercial use until the formal release and licensing of that variety. So that's that's the basics. So I thought I'd give you the basics before I showed you the varieties, but we will give you much more details once we have them worked out in this fall. So this is a list of all of them, and let me explain what I've got here. So there are 4 different trial systems, and I'm going to show you each one. One is called, and if you look in the middle of the slide, you can see in the center, it says Seedless Lemon 1.0, Seedless Lemon 2.0, Low-Seeded Mandarin Hybrid Trials, and Pink Oro Blanco Trials. And so on the left, you have the selections that are in each of those trials. If you look to the right of the center, you see the year that that trial was planted. And if you look to the far right, you see the remaining trial evaluation years that are needed as part of our replicated trials. So we need 3 years more of yield for Lemon 1.0, and fruit quality data is what FQ stands for. So what I've given you on the far left is the selection, its code number, and then a slash tag, a slash, and the VI number for that one that is through the CCPP. So I've given you those for each one. I'm going to go through and talk about each one separately. The first one is the 2021 lemon trial, or we call it Lemon 1.0. And the locations for this trial are Lindcove, Santa Paula, Riverside, and Thermal. And as you saw, it was planted in 2021. So we got the first fruit from this trial system. Of course, we had individual trees prior to that, but individual trees of each one prior to that were used to determine to put it into the trial system. But in terms of having multiple trees, this is they were planted in 2021, and the first fruit quality and the first fruit that was a sizable amount of fruit that we could take data on was 2 years after this in 2023. And of course, the very first year, the fruit, as you know, from very young trees is not particularly typical of what fruit looks like when it's mature. So that was important for us to have understanding of whether this is true to type. It represented the selection that we planted. Now, these are on a number of rootstocks, and the rootstocks vary by location, but Carrizo, Flying Dragon, Volk, Mac, Benton, Swingle, Rich, and C35. And as I said, the remaining testing needs to be done for 3 years for yield and fruit quality. So these are the 4 selections in this Lemon 1.0 that you can see here. They are slightly different, but they all look very much like commercial lemons. And I'm going to talk about each one at a time. This front one, ALE001, is an irradiated selection that produces fruit that have a really good size and a smooth rind with sort of average rind thickness, and they have less than 1 seed per fruit, compared to the control, which had an average of 10 seeds per fruit. We know based on the parentage that most citranch and trifoliate rootstocks would not be recommended for this particular selection. This is a little bit of data, and you can see if you look, across the top of the chart, you can see the word seed. You can see that the average number of seeds for ALE001 is 0.2, whereas for the control, the average was 11.4. Okay. And we also have color ratings. You see that the color rating is based on the rind of the fruit, and it was slightly higher colored or brighter than the control. The rind thickness was slightly less than the control. Okay. Okay, this is the second one, and WRL001 is an irradiated selection that has trees that have fairly dense foliage, and the fruit has really good exterior quality with an average rind thickness and smoothness. The fruit tend to be a little bit more round and less elongated. And the rootstock incompatibility has been noted with C35. And this is the data for this one, and the chart is organized in the same way the first chart is. You can see if you look at seed number again, since these were all selected for seedlessness or low seededness, you can see the WRK001 had an average of 0.9 seeds per fruit in this 10 fruit sample, and the control had 9.6 seeds per fruit. Yeah, and you can see that the rind thickness is very similar among both the control and the irradiated selection. Okay, this is the third one, LFN001. And this irradiated selection has fairly oblong fruit with an average juice content and peel thickness. And it actually contains less than 1 seed per fruit in large samples. It also appears to be, it is compatible with a wide range of rootstocks. So that's what we know about LFN001. And if you look at the chart, the data we're providing here, you can see it had 0 seeds per 10 fruit sample. For the irradiated selection, LFN001, and the control had an average of 8.7 seeds per fruit. It was the average was slightly less percent juice than the control. It also was very similar in rind thickness, and yeah, okay. This is the next one, and this one called LTL001 is another irradiated selection, but it of a low thorn but seedy lemon. So it was a low thorn seedy lemon variety that was found at the UCR research field. And the exact genomic origin of the selection isn't known yet, which should be considered when you're selecting an appropriate rootstock. It seems the rootstock compatibility seems more similar to Eureka than the Lisbon. The fruit size is competitive with commercial standards, and early trials indicate that there's a strong potential for both fresh market and juice production. Okay. Okay, so then next we're going to go to the next one, which is the lemon 2.0. So this was not planted. This was planted later in 2022. So these trees are even younger, and they trial locations are at the Lindcove, Santa Paula, Riverside, and Thermal. So at the same locations, and in most cases they're planted right next to each other. They were planted in September of 2022 on the following rootstocks: Carrizo, Flying Dragon, Volk, Mac, X639, Swingle, Rich, C35, and the choice of rootstock depends upon location. We have 4 years of yield and fruit quality that still need to be collected for this particular replicated trial system. These are the 3, and then we have, as in the first trial, we also have them planted with their controls. So these WKR003, LFN003, LFN004, these are the 3. So the first one, WKR003, produces really rounded fruit has really good exterior quality. The fruit, the rind thickness is fairly average, and it has an average smoothness. But the shape definitely is more round. The seed count is really minimal with fewer than 1 seeds per fruit. You for this one would need to avoid C35 due to incompatibility issues. This is the data like you saw before, and you can see if you look at the seed number on the far right that there was 0.1 seeds per 10 fruit sample. And that the control had 9.6 seeds. Okay, let's see what else. I think. Okay. This is the second one called LFN003, and this one produces fruit that are more oblong and have good exterior fruit quality. That they have fairly average juice content and peel thickness, but they do have fewer than 1 seed per fruit, and large samples were taken. This variety or selection, it's a better word, is is compatible with multiple various rootstocks. Okay, so this is the data for this one, and if you look at the seed column, you can see it's fairly dramatic difference between the control on the bottom, which had an average of 8.7 seeds per fruit, versus this irradiated selection, which had 0.1 seeds per fruit. Okay. Okay, so this is a next one called LFN004. This one also produces, this irradiated selection also produces fairly oblong fruit, but they have good size and average juice content and thiel thickness. This selection is seedless, and the fruit is regarded as attractive, not only for its shape, but its smooth rind. And it does perform well on multiple rootstocks. You can see again the seed number difference, the significant difference between the control having 8.7 seeds per fruit and the 0 seeds per fruit for the irradiated selection. Yeah. They have similar widths. The actual irradiated selection is slightly longer fruit, so it's a little bit more oblong than the control. Okay, so this is the next trial system, and this is what we call the 2023, because that's the year it was planted, low-seeded mandarin hybrid trials. And they are at 3 locations, Lindcove, Santa Paula, and Riverside. There isn't one in the desert. And they were planted in June of 2023 and are on Carrizo, C22, Rich, C35, and Flying Dragon, which is only at Lindcove. Since this is planted in 2023 and it takes 2 years till we get an amount of fruit, the remaining, we still need 5 years of yield and fruit quality data for this replicated trial. And these are the 4 in this trial system that are being planned for these growers' trials. PGM 001, PGM 002, CPH 001, and SAC 001. Okay, so this one, you can see on the far left that PGM 001 is compared to its control, and you can see a dramatic difference in reduction in seed size. You can also see that the fruit has a rich, dark orange interior and a thin red-orange rind. It's fairly juicy, and it has excellent sugar to acid balance. And so it's, which makes it really highly flavorful. It's easy to peel and has a moderately pebbled texture. So you notice that there were 2 that have PGM. So PGM 001 is actually, the fruit are slightly larger inside than PGM 002, but PGM 002 that I'm going to show you next have actually fewer seeds on average. The control type, in contrast, is known to have many seeds, as you saw in that picture, and is self-incompatible. Okay, so here's the data. You can see if you look at the seed column, the actual control has 5.2 seeds per on average, whereas the irradiated selection has 1.7 seeds on average. Yeah, and you can also see that, yeah, okay, let's go. And then this is PGM 002, also has a deep orange interior and thin orange rind. It's got a well-balanced flavor. The fruit is round and easy to peel, and it tends to be slightly smaller in size than PGM 001, but has even fewer seeds. And again, as I told you, for PGM 001, the control is self-incompatible. Okay, and you can see that if you look at the seed number, 0.2 versus for the irradiated selection versus 5.2 for the control. Okay. Okay, this one is a different fruit in the sense that it is bigger, and you can see that by looking at the tree on the far left. It's an irradiated selection of what was a pomelo hybrid that was originally developed in UCR in 1950s, that matures in January. So this is an irradiated selection of that for that one, and the irradiated selection has significantly fewer seeds, less than 2 per fruit, versus the control, which actually had 40 seeds per fruit. So it's a big significant drop in seeds, but is not zero. The fruit is medium to large. It has a dark yellow, thin and smooth rind. The flesh is dark yellow, as you can see here. And it is a very juicy fruit and has a subacid flavor. So the Brix levels range from 12 to 14, and though it's large fruit, it does hang on the tree fairly well. This is the data, and you can see that significant drop in number of fruit at this particular 12-13 sample date, with 1.5 seeds for the irradiated selection and 38.3 for the control. Okay. Okay, and this last trial was actually planted in June 2019. So this one is the one farthest along. It's only at 2 locations, Lindcove and Riverside. The rootstocks are Carrizo and Rich, and we have 1 year remaining testing for yield and fruit quality. Okay, so these are the 3 different fruit. The first 2 on the left are actually pomelo grapefruit hybrids, and they both have pink flesh based on lycopene. So you can see that. And the one on the right has different parentage. All 3 of these are hybrids. They're not irradiated selections. But the one on the far right is a triploid hybrid of an acidulous pomelo blood orange. Acidulous pomelo crossed with a blood orange. This first one, RS95 .1413, was developed in 1995, and that's where the 95 comes from. It's a triploid hybrid, and the reason we call these a pink Oro Blanco trial is because they resemble an Oro Blanco in sort of their shape and size, but they're pink in color. And the external is pink interior, not the external. And it has a very low seed count under real heavy cross-pollination. And it has a grapefruit-like, this particular one has a grapefruit-like internal texture. It has fairly low in acid and mild in bitterness, so it has with an excellent flavor. It's a round to oblate in shape, and it has a medium hollow core, as you can see in the picture above. The rind thickness is low to medium compared to other pomelo hybrids, and it matures in January with a Brix range of 10 to 12. And it is productive on both chorizo and trifoliate rootstocks. This next one was produced in 1998, and this is another triploid hybrid, and it also resembles a pink or oblongo type fruit. It has a pink interior due to lycopene and a very low seed count, even under heavy pollination. It has a finer internal texture than a typical pomelo, and the fruit is low in acid and bitterness, and it has excellent flavor. The rind thickness is more similar to Chandler pomelo, and it has this medium hollow core. The Brix level is similar to the other one. It ranges from 12 to 14, and it matures in January. This one also performs well both on chorizo and trifoliate rootstocks. The last one is a triploid hybrid of an acidless pomelo and a blood orange, and it was created in 1979. This large grapefruit size fruit has an orange-colored pebbly rind. This one also matures in January, and the flesh is orange with red flecking, and the red flecking is due to anthocyanin and not lycopene. And it intensifies where you have cooler climates or climates where you get a day-night differentiation in temperature. But that red internal color can be highly variable from one fruit to another. These fruit are seedless, and they have a rich, moderately sweet flavor. Brix about 12 to 14, and they are also low in acid. And they can also hang well on a tree, and I know that's a characteristic we've been talking about recently. It also appears to be highly productive. So that is the end of the different selections, both irradiated selections and hybrid crosses that we are planned for this new growers trial in 2026. And so thank you. And next is Glenn. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing.
Great. Thank you so much, Tracy. As she mentioned, our next presentation will be by Dr. Wright with his talk entitled CRB Core Breeding Program Results of Multi-Location Lemon Trials. Glenn, whenever you're ready, please go ahead and
All
share your
right.
screen and you can start.
I think I'm sharing it now.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm reporting on 4 of the lemon variety trials. We call them multi-location lemon trials at various locations, which after Tracy's excellent presentation, you will be familiar with them. And let's see. There we go. We have those 4 sites that she mentioned. The Santa Paula site for these is actually Limoneira's Rancho de la Cuesta Ranch, which is a few miles north of Santa Paula, CVARs and UCR. And we'll talk mostly about the Lindcove site, the Santa Paula site, and the thermal site today. Originally, I wasn't going to include any of the Riverside site. However, I was able to put a couple of extra slides in this morning, and so we will discuss it, but maybe just to a little bit lesser extent. The trees in all the sites were planted in 2015 at approximately the same time in the late spring, early summer. And at each site, we have 6 varieties: Corona Foothills, Limoneira Fino 49, which is the chief winter lemon of Spain, Limoneira 8A, which you all know, Limoneira 8A Lisbon IR1, which is an irradiated seedless variety out of Mike Roos's and Tracy Kahn's program, Walker Lisbon, which has been around a long time and was actually, I guess, noticed by me and a grower at one point years ago at the Lindcove field station, and Yen Ben Lisbon, which was an interesting one at the time out of Australia. And these were chosen because they were either interesting or good performers in a desert lemon trial that Tracy and I started in 2006 and we finished in 2016. at each of these sites, there are 3 rootstocks, and there are typically 18 different combinations. And so you can see at the table what the rootstocks are by site, the number of trees per combination. We have a little bit fewer trees at Lindcove because we have a demonstration block there. And the first harvest season for most of them was in 2016-17. Remember, they were planted first in 2015. And except in the desert, we first harvest was 2017, And the convention that we have is that a season starts on September 1st. So 2016-17 is September 1st of 2016 through August of 2017. We will talk a little bit about yenben. It was of interest. It wasn't particularly exceptional in our trial in the desert, but it was interest. It was on Macrophylla rootstock. It had a smaller fruit, lots of smaller fruit. And at that point, we felt maybe it would be interesting as a bar lemon or something like that, similar to a Persian lime. However, as we budded these trees on the varieties for this new trial, these new trials planted in 2015, we found over the years that many of them were incompatible to varying degrees, meaning in some cases, 100% of the trees died. In other cases, 25% of the trees died with varying trifoliate and trifoliate hybrid rootstocks. And furthermore, after speaking with marketing people, we decided the fruit was just too small for commerce. And it's not particularly economical to pick. The pickers spend a lot of time on these trees and the bag doesn't fill up very fast. So in 2022-23, we stopped taking yield on yenben. You will see yenben in these to a certain degree in these upcoming graphics, but we are not really talking about them anymore. I was thinking about putting a picture of a very ugly dog right in here because yenben is somewhat of an ugly dog. So we'll start out with the Lindcove location. As you can see, we have 6 different selections. You see those on the bottom. This is the cumulative yield from the original in 2016 through 2017 with some statistics on the top. Walker was the best, and yenben was the worst. But if you don't consider yenben, then 8A-IR1 was the worst, about a 35% yield drop there, more or less. However, the irradiated selection did seem to improve as time went on. You can see now we're the Walker is surpassed now 2,000 pounds per tree total since we started harvesting them, and the others sit typically between 1,500 and 2,000, except for the irradiated selection. Now we have all these different rootstocks, and so if you separate this out by rootstocks, this particular chart is the same information, but expanded by the rootstocks, and you can see we have the Corona Foothills as the first set of 3, the Pheno 49 as the second set, Limoneira 8A as the third set, 8A-IR1 is the fourth set of 3, and Walker is the fifth set of 3. And by the way, I should mention that if you look at these names of the varieties very closely, and then you go back and you look at the coded varieties for the 1.0 and the 2.0 trial, you can guess what some of the parents are for the 1.0 and the 2.0 trial. In any event, you can see that yenben is a real dog down there at the end. So again, Walker did very well. Typically, C35 was the best rootstock for the Walker, for the Corona Foothills. Not so much for the Pheno 49. The Carrizo was the better of the 3 for Pheno 49. And for the irradiated Limoneira selection, the Rich was the best rootstock at this particular location. Now we do a lot of, and then I decided we would take all this and we would rank them by most yield to the least. And so the Walker on C35 has the best cumulative yield over almost 2,200 pounds over the years. And the 8A-IR1 on Carrizo was the least. And these multicolored bars up at the top are significant. So if you want to know, well, is the Walker C35 significantly different, for example, than the Pheno 49? Oops, I have gone backward. The Pheno 49 on Rich, you would say yes, it is, because the blue line is the significance is, if the blue line doesn't cover, for example, the particular variety, it is significantly different than the other one that you want to compare. So 8AIR1, which is the irradiated on Carrizo, isn't significantly different than all the ones ahead of it, all the way up to 8A on C35. But then the varieties that are further to the right from that point are significantly different than the 8AIR1. So you can kind of guess that if the colored bar over two particular varieties you want to look at is, if it's there, then they're not significantly different. So there's a lot of variability in these trials, which is why these bars are so broad, but nonetheless, we can draw some conclusions. Now, we also went through and have done packout over the years. We have packout for every year, or almost every year, for all of these trials, and I won't put all of them in, but here is an example for January of 21. And we would typically harvest these either in December or January of a particular year. And you can see that the 8AR1, even though it had less fruit, the fruit size was larger. So the way these work is you can see the packout on the bottom, the varying fruit sizes, and then this is a 100% bar chart. So if, for example, you want to look at the sizes, the green, orange, blue, and I guess that's kind of a maroon at the bottom, which would correspond to the 95, 75, 63s and the oversized. You can see that the 8AR one has more fruit of those particular categories, and therefore the bar is a little bit further advanced out to the right. If we go and we look at this by the varying rootstocks expanded, you can see this is a similar story, and I put a oval around the particular the 8AIR ones to show you that sure enough the fruit size is quite a bit larger for that particular one at this site in 21. Now if we went and looked at 25, which is the most recent one, you see pretty much the same story. The 8AIR one has larger fruit than the other ones. If you don't consider the 8AIR one, then the Corona Foothills, the 8A, and the Walker are a little bit larger. Pheno 49 is a little bit less. And if you separate out again by the varying rootstocks, you can see pretty much the same story. I don't know that there was a real difference between rootstocks as far as fruit size was going in this particular trial for this particular year. We have done some fruit quality parameters on these. We have looked at a bunch of different things. We've looked at juice percentage, pH, Brix to acid ratio, peel thickness, peel smoothness, and seeds per fruit. And for this particular trial, for 2024, which is the most recent data we have, the only thing that was significantly different was the seeds per fruit. And you can see we had about just a little bit over 1 seed per fruit for the irradiated selection, and anywhere between 11 and 16 seeds per fruit for the other selections at the Lindcove site. So some conclusions for Lindcove. I would say the Walker Lisbon had the most cumulative yield, but it wasn't significantly better than 8A. 8A and 8AIR1 had the least yield. So even though Walker wasn't significantly better than Limoneira 8A, it consistently had a little bit more yield. Walker 8A and Foothills performed best on Carrizo. Pheno was best on C35. 8AIR1 was best on Rich 16.6, but the yield differences between most of these combinations was statistically insignificant. 8AIR1 had the largest fruit size, and Walker had the smallest fruit size, and all the rest were intermediate. And not surprisingly, the 8AIR1 was virtually seedless. Now we'll move on to Santa Paula, and what we'll see is pretty much the same types of graphs, but the responses of the varieties, the selections, was a little bit different. So in this case, the Walker again had the best cumulative yield, Not quite as much as Lindcove. Remember, Lindcove had just surpassed about 2,000 pounds per tree, whereas here at Santa Paula, we were approaching 1,800 pounds per tree for the best selection, which was Walker. Uh, Surprisingly enough, 8AIR1 was not significantly different because of the variability in the field, but Corona Foothills was the worst performer in this particular site, not counting Yenben, of course, which is the dog. And so then when you go ahead and you look at it with the varying rootstocks, typically Macrophylla was the best. For Corona Foothills, Macrophylla was the best. However, for Pheno 49, Swingle was the best rootstock. For 8A, Macrophylla was the best. 8AIR1, Macrophylla was the best. And Walker, Macrophylla was the best. So it's a bit of a surprise in this location that Pheno 49 performed slightly better on Swingle than it did on Macrophylla, but that's the data that we've got. When we rank these, then you can see that Walker on Mac was the best performer, followed by 8A on Mac. In fact, most of the selections on Mac are the better performers, with the exception of Pheno 49 on Mac, which was kind of down there in the middle. And you can see that Corona on Carrizo was, for whatever reason, really not very good. Don't know why, but it was the worst, even worse than well, and 8A on Carrizo, interestingly enough. So Carrizo was a problem in this particular block, whereas Swingle and Macrophylla were not. We look at packout, we have a little bit different story. 8AIR1 again had fairly large fruit, but also Corona Foothills did, even though it didn't produce very well, it had fairly good sized fruit. Pheno 49, Walker, and 8A were not quite as good for a 21. So these particular block we harvested multiple times, typically 3 times per year, oftentimes in the spring. So I thought this was an appropriate time to show you some packout. When you spread this out and you look at the different rootstocks, then Walker on Mac and Corona on Mac, all the Macrophyllas had better fruit size than the other ones did. Swingle had fairly smaller, quite a bit smaller fruit size. Maybe that's not surprising. But Carrizo, for whatever reason, Pheno 49 and Walker in this particular season had fairly quite small fruit, which was a bit surprising. Then we show you the 25 pack out by Scion, and there is, well, the 8AR1 was good. The Pheno 49 was good, but it wasn't probably significantly different than any of the others, just slightly better. And then when you go and you flesh out or expand on the rootstocks, then maybe the Swingle was a little bit better, maybe. So it's a little bit hard to say. Now, I can't draw a definitive conclusion there. So for Santa Paula, Walker had the best cumulative yield, but not really significantly better than 8AIR1 and Pheno 49. And surprisingly, Corona Foothills had the least yield. Most of the scions performed best on Macrophylla, except Pheno 49, which produced the most fruit when on Swingle. The least yield for any scion was when budded to Carrizo. Sometimes the trees on Macrophylla had the largest fruit, and other times there was no effective rootstock. And the effects of scion or rootstock on fruit size varied by year. And we did not take fruit quality measurements on Santa Paula, and that's because we would have had to transport them through a HOB quarantine zone, which was problematic. At CVARs in the desert, however, we have a radically different story, and I would remind you that these in the desert, there was no 16, 17 yield. These were a little bit slower. However, the cumulative yield for these varieties was actually higher than the cumulative yield for the Lindcove site and the Santa Paula site. So these trees had one fewer year of yield, but they had more cumulative yield. And Corona Foothills was the best in this particular, and Pheno 49 and Walker were and 8A to a lesser extent weren't significantly different, but 8A never performs, in our experience, 8A never performs quite as well as these other three in the desert. And so you can note that we're looking at 2,250 pounds for Corona. And when you see the next slide, you'll see there's some of them with approaching 3,000 pounds of fruit with one less year worth of yield. So if you spread it out by the selections, Macrophylla was clearly the best rootstock. And you can see that Corona Foothills on Mac and Pheno 49 on Mac, we're actually almost 3,000 pounds of fruit per tree. And Walker was sitting at almost at 2,500 when Macrophylla was the rootstock. And so, even Yenben, which of course was terrible, performed best on Macrophylla in the desert. But then we still stopped collecting data because it wasn't worth it. Carrizo, on the other hand, was terrible. Not surprisingly, if you know growing citrus in the desert, Carrizo doesn't perform very well at all. Macrophylla was clearly the best, and Volcameriana was a solid second. So when you go and you rank those, then of course we had, like I mentioned, almost 3,000 pounds of fruit per tree with Corona and Pheno on Macrophylla, going down to 390 pounds of fruit with 8A-IR1 on Carrizo. 8A-IR1 and Carrizo was terrible in the desert. There are other combinations with 8A-IR1 that were better, but on Carrizo it wasn't good at all. And if you look at the packout, well, Pheno 49 and Corona typically in the desert, we had the best fruit size. Tracy and I noticed that on our previous trials that started in 2006, that Pheno 49 and Corona had the best fruit size, even better than 8A, and Walker was not quite as good. And then if you look at the I pooled this is the 21 and 22 pooled packout by scion and rootstock. Maybe you can see in there that Macrophylla was typically a little bit better. Not surprisingly, you look at Corona on Mac, you look on Pheno 49 on Mac, it was typically a little bit better than some of the others. And we did do fruit quality in CVARs, and once again, not surprisingly, there was a significant difference as far as seedlessness, and so that's the maroon bars on the chart with approximately 1 seed per fruit for the irradiated Limoneira selection, and anywhere between 10 and 13 seeds per fruit for the others. But we also noted there was a significant difference in peel thickness. The 8A had a bit thicker peel than the Pheno 49 did. All the other things that we looked at, juice percent, pH, Brix to acid ratio, peel smoothness, there was no significant difference. So for CVARs, despite yielding 1 year later than the other trees at CVARs had the greatest cumulative yield. Corona Foothills had the most cumulative yield, but not significantly better than Pheno 49, Walker, and 8A. 8A-IR1 had the least, on about 50% overall of Corona Foothills. Macrophylla was clearly the best rootstock. The least was Carrizo. Volcameriana was intermediate. Corona Foothills and Pheno 49 had the largest fruit size, but it probably wasn't significantly better, but it seems to be a constant for our trees in the desert. And not surprisingly, the radiated selection is virtually seedless, and Limoneira 8A has slightly thicker peel, and there was a significant difference. Now, I was able to add the UCR data, and the UCR data is fairly similar to the data at CVARs, although the yields weren't as high. So we're talking about almost 3,000 pounds of fruit and I would say that I don't have the 24-25 yield on this particular chart, so these numbers will be a little bit higher for comparative purposes. But the yields clearly at UCR weren't as high as those at CVARs, but the trends are the same. Corona and Pheno 49 had the best, and 8A was actually not significantly worse than Corona, but all of them were better than the irradiated selection. Walker was rather intermediate, and we won't talk anymore about Yenben. And then when you go ahead and you expand it out by the rootstocks, then again, Corona and Carrizo was the best. and because we didn't have macrophylla in this particular trial, and then phenol 49 on rich 16.6 trifoliate was the second best of everything. So unfortunately, I don't have any more information on UCR. You can get a hold of me if you want to know, and if, ultimately we will publish it probably again in the Citrograph magazine. I want to give props, of course, to everyone who was mentioned in Tracy's slide. All of those people that were listed there, whom names I won't repeat, helped with this trial. A lot of sweating in the desert, for sure. Also, we want to give thanks to our various packing house help. Of course, it would be the folks at the Lindcove field station. Limoneira helped us greatly at Santa Paula. Since we were on their land. Villa Park has helped us recently with a lot of help at Riverside, and Richard Bagdasarian in Mecca was very helpful and continues to be very helpful with our trial down in the desert. So at this point, I think I'm ready for questions, and so here we go.
Thank you, Tracy and Glenn. We are now gonna go ahead and ask any questions. If you do have any questions for the presenters, please use the Q&A function. So Melinda or Joey, do you want to go ahead and ask that first question?
Sure. This question is, what was the control of Lemon 1.0 comparisons?
Of Lemon 1.0 trials? Is that the question?
It just says Lemon 1.0 comparisons.
So Lemon 1.0 has, for each one of those selection, there's a control that was the control that was irradiated. So there's multiple controls.
So if I might add, so for example, one of the parents is a Walker Lisbon. And so Walker Lisbon is included, and the irradiated Walker is one of those ones that had the code. So they're all in there.
I see people with their hand raised. Please go ahead and use the Q&A function if you have a question.
It looks like we have a second question as well. That is, why are Yenben yields lower than in New Zealand?
Why are Yenben yields lower than New Zealand? I don't know. I haven't been to New Zealand to know that for sure. But I would say that there was a report out of New Zealand that stated that because of the high fruit load, the trees had very small fruit out of New Zealand, which is clearly what we saw. But as far as overall yields, there's the degree of incompatibility. It was pretty much incompatible with every trifoliate or trifoliate hybrid rootstock that we put it on, which of course led to a lot of reduced yield. And even with macrophylla, it just didn't perform well. Don't know that I can say exactly why.
Okay, it looks like we have one final question for you, Glenn. The person unfortunately missed the reason for no SP, I'm assuming that's Santa Paula quality this year or in the past. Can you please elaborate if possible, if anything is standing out?
Yeah, well, the reason is because the fruit quality for this particular trial is done at my lab in Yuma, and it could be done at Riverside, but in my case, it was done at Yuma. And in order to transport the fruit from Santa Paula to Yuma, you have to drive through a quarantine zone.
But
And
Glenn, we did have yield other years, just not that year.
no, we're just talking about fruit quality.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know that I've ever taken fruit quality data out of Santa Paula.
Okay.
So maybe you have.
No.
But I haven't.
Okay.
Great. We will stay on for a few more minutes if there's any more questions. Oops. But I would like to thank Tracy and Glenn for sharing this information with us today, and to all of our participants for joining today's webinar. And then to stay up to date with upcoming CRB events, be sure to visit our website, www.citrusresearch.org. We will stay on for a few minutes in case anyone has any questions. Thank you all for joining today.